All right, so welcome everyone to 2025's first Global Chamber League of Global Nonprofits event. I'm Jacob Dietz, and I'm excited to be here with this incredible community to dive into a critical conversation on legal pathways to nonprofit sustainability. For those who are new, Global Chamber is a powerhouse global network spanning 525 metros worldwide. It's a community of CEOs, executives, investors, and impact leaders dedicated to making cross-border collaboration seamless, because global business and global impact shouldn't feel like they're worlds apart. One of the biggest confidence boosters I've had in my career is knowing that I don't have to figure everything out alone. If there's an opportunity anywhere in the world, I know I'm only one warm introduction away. And to me, that's one of the greatest powers of Global Chamber. And for nonprofits, social enterprises, and impact-driven organizations, this network is game-changing. Whether it's forging new funding partnerships, identifying key markets, or finding collaborators who align with your mission, the connections here can be the key to unlocking long-term sustainability. So if you're a nonprofit leader wondering how to navigate these turbulent times, you're in the right place, because today's conversation is about rethinking the way we fund impact. So I want to set up sort of the why behind this event. Nonprofits have long been the backbone of impact work across the globe. Yet in today's world where funding sources are shifting, policies are very unpredictable, and economic pressures are mounting, many organizations are being forced to rethink sustainability. I saw the writing on the wall early in my fundraising journey, and instead of asking, how can we raise more grants? I started asking, how can we create financial independence? How can we take our power back? That's why we're here today. We're not just discussing challenges, we're exploring practical legal pathways that can help impact-driven organizations move beyond the traditional donor and grant models into more sustainable, scalable, and innovative revenue streams. And so one of my driving philosophies is, and has always been since I've started this recent journey, building a network of networks, because power in numbers is real. Global Chamber is one of those networks, and organizations like Catalyst 2030 and the Global Mental Health Task Force are doing similar work in their respective spaces. Today's conversation is about linking knowledge, expertise, and resources so nonprofits aren't navigating these challenges alone. My journey has taken me through nearly every sector. It wasn't necessarily planned this way, but once I started, I couldn't stop. Nonprofit, social entrepreneurship, AI, sustainability, education, policy, tech, and more. But if my background as a geologist and former science teacher has taught me anything, maybe my ADHD is showing there, it says that everything is connected. Ecosystems thrive when different elements work together. The same goes for industries, organizations, and global movements. That's why from the moment I attended a League of Global Nonprofit event in June 2023, I knew I'd found my people. It's also where I met some of the most impactful connectors I've ever encountered. People like Doug and Cesar, who have been significant influences in my life and who understand in that today's world, collaboration is the new competition. Even with AI shaping how we work, I want to enter a shameless plug for tomorrow's Global Chamber AI event. I co-host monthly with Yuka Nakasone, Humanoid Robots in Manufacturing. Should be interesting. But even with AI, going at it alone is not an option, even with robots. If you try to operate in a silo, you'll fall behind. This really is the era of networks, ecosystems, and alliances. And today we're going to explore how nonprofits can build a more resilient future by expanding their financial models and leveraging legal pathways for sustainability. With that, it's my honor to introduce today's featured speaker. Someone who is redefining access to legal and financial sustainability for impact-driven organizations worldwide. Chris Bennett is the founder of TIL, Technology Innovation Law, where he's pioneered legal solutions that have helped over 100 entrepreneurs generate an estimated 43 million in financial value. His work at the intersection of law, technology, and social impact empowers nonprofits, creatives, and entrepreneurs to protect and monetize their intellectual property, explore hybrid revenue models, and future-proof their sustainable strategies. Check, check, check. All incredible things. And so this isn't just another conversation about nonprofit struggles. This is a strategic playbook for resilience, innovation, and financial empowerment. Chris, I know I'm excited to learn more. I know everyone else is excited to learn from you. So let's dive in. I'll pass it over. The mic is yours.
Well, Jacob, thank you for that. And let me first express my appreciation for the opportunity to share with this audience and and also share a couple of things on my end. First is not giving legal advice today because that's inappropriate under the bar. We need client privilege. But what I will be sharing are best practices, experiences, and observations based on our work. Second is Jacob gave us a great introduction talking about the overall scope of the Global Chamber. If you leave with nothing today, our ask is that you at least consume contacts, information, and recognize that the Global Chamber is a network resource to which you can reach out. And while I personally and professionally may not have the answers, I will do what I can to try to connect you with someone that does and may be better qualified if that's in your best interest. So with that said, let me just take you through the journey where I'm going to try to meet each of the commitments that was made in the program that was listed on the Global Chamber site. And I want to build on what Jacob shared. He talked about the nonprofit world and this fluid environment which we find ourselves with significant policy changes in America. He also talked about different challenges for non-governmental organizations and not-for-profits. In candor, I'm going to draw on experience from the 150 plus clients I've worked with on the law side. Not-for-profit might not be the best model. And I'm going to share with you an anonymously a use case of a client who's dealing with that challenge today. And he also talked about the fact that partnerships is essential. And there was a boost for AI, and I'm going to share with you the counter theory for AI, and that AI is great when anonymity and scale are helpful and it's properly supervised. But I think you personally and your not-for-profit organizations have the real value, which is the individual stories that each person has uniquely. And as AI becomes more predominant, those human stories arguably increase in value. So let me first jump into the objectives and let me ask you to help us share. If you have questions or comments, drop them in the chat. I might miss them, but Jacob is Jacob on the spot in being able to pick those up for us. And we'll also have some time at the end, and I will actively ask you to interact because I'm going to share with you from my perspective, but the goal is to meet you where you are. So we want to make sure you leave with something from yours. So let's talk about the objectives for the program. First, we're going to talk about some different pathways for sustainability. I'm going to share with you some traditional options for not-for-profits, which you probably know, but also share with you some of the mission-driven for-profit options, for which I actually happen to have a couple of organizations that I own predominantly or I run today, one in law and one in legal tech. Then we'll talk a bit about alternative structures. I'm excited to share that we have some clients who are actually doing this today in unique market segments, and they, from what we can see, are getting traction and attention from different funding sources and partnerships. Then we'll mention some of the benefit to costs of looking at whether or not your model is in the right place today. And I want to amplify that by a story from an event I attended yesterday with Georgetown University has a social impact organization. And they had a number of subject matter experts. And one of them made the comment of wanting to share the not-for-profit business model with the audience. And I think that's a key takeaway, in that you, in fact, are in a business where budget funding minus operating costs equals hopefully surplus, maybe break even, hopefully not deficit. And so understanding your fundamental cost structures and incremental surplus versus deficit of providing services to your clients and your users is essential. And last but not least, I want to amplify something that I'm passionate about because my two companies are in that space of intellectual property rights, because that's the legal recognition of some of these unique foundational stories that you have as a person, because no one's taken your life journey but you, as well as it is likely there are many of those stories in your organization with the communities that you serve. And with their permission and in the right way, those can be harnessed to make progress in pursuing your aspirations. So let's pull the thread on each of those 4 key program goals for today. This one starts with different pathways to sustainability. And I will share that a part of this presentation is the beneficiary of generative AI. And in each of those cases, I went back and checked what generative AI said, because as I think you and I probably know, and Jason does, AI does have the ability to hallucinate and make stuff up. But it does stuff fast and it does it at scale. This is a representation of a typical revenue stream for a not-for-profit. And based on a lot of aggregate data, and I think this is a 2023 source, and we have sources in the back of this presentation deck. It seems to think that you're getting most of your fees and revenues, 50%, from services and goods from private sources, probably service delivery. This isn't aggregate, by the way. So your particular organization, whether you're in Washington, D.C., or in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or in Singapore, will probably differ. It talks about private contributions from donors. There may be other sources, for example, returns on investments if you have an investment portfolio, government grants, federal and state, and then maybe fee for services, where you may be providing a privatized service, you may be providing a service that is at least going to the public sector that a government feels it wanted to contract out. That's kind of a revenue picture today. What we don't see in that are the potential for licensing revenues, which could come from intellectual property. There could be joint venture revenues from doing partnerships with co-branding with business partners. There could be equity revenues if you actually are in a position where you have the resources and the knowledge to become an investor in key sectors that might have strategic value for what your mission is today, and do it in such a way that you're in full compliance. And if you choose to stay a not-for-profit, you can do so. There are strategic opportunities to complement the current revenue model. And some of those may be, in fact, if in consultation with your membership and your mission, you determine that pivoting from being a pure not-for-profit is in your best interest. Those are all major strategic decisions. This is the first of 4 unpackings, if you will, that are based on something I'm calling a 4M model, which is going to talk about mission, which is what this slide represents today. What is your mission? And are you reviewing your mission today in light of the developments in the world? We'll also talk about members, because if you're considering changing your mission without consulting with your membership, whether it's the board of directors or whether it's the feet on the ground members or digital streams in the air members, then that's not best practice. And so we've talked about briefly different ways to create more value for organizations: public sector, private sector, partnerships, structures. I will mention, I'm going to back up for a second. Just looking at the different not-for-profits models, I went to the IRS tables, And I counted 36 different not-for-profit approaches under the US IRS tables that are available. I do not know if those same numbers are available in other countries, but I know there are common approaches available. So one of the things in thinking about your mission is this, simply put. You might have started as a 501c3 initially. Is there an opportunity, if you're committed to the not-for-profit path, to become a different type of not-for-profit? One, for example, that's focused on, if you're in a risk mitigation space. For example, you're in California, you're trying to help homeowners avoid fire risk, which is a recent challenge that the state had. Is there a space to shifting to becoming a not-for-profit in the insurance space, which there is a not-for-profit option for that? So perhaps in addition to your current path, there may be a path for pivoting on your not-for-profit status, if that's what meets your members and your model and your mission. Pulling the next set of strings, if you will, from who should consider alternative structures. I'm going to answer that directly. I think periodically every organization should consider whether or not their structure is right for their mission. And I think what's happening in the world today is emblematic of why that is wise. That type of review can help you both look for places to optimize your current operations, but it can also give you a sense for planning if the environment changes. And a quick analogy is I had a number of relatives who were in the military. They talked about the benefits of the military's constant planning for scenarios. And they were authentic in saying that in many cases, once fighting starts, the plans go out the window. But the benefit is that it motivated them to think about what to do when a contingency was needed. And that's allows a lot faster response than if you don't start considering contingencies until the wolf's at the door or the fire is outside the building. So we would recommend that all parties periodically consider alternative structures just as good practice. On the alternative for that, who shouldn't consider it? I would summarize as 2 points. Folks for whom changing structure could create a violation of their fiduciary responsibilities and their commitment to their members. And also folks for whom changing in a specific way could create a compliance issue, which could result in regulatory and law problems. And those are not immovable barriers. If you have those, the best practice is then to understand them, consult with your members, and consult with different subject matter experts, and see if there are things that you can do to change your status and stay in full compliance and meet your mission. This emphasizes the member aspect of it, and it is so key. I will just share that our social impact work involves underserved creatives and entrepreneurs. What we do is available to all, but the work that we do is very personal and direct with our client base. And the 4 things we learned in talking to our members as a part of research that was funded by the National Science Foundation is they wanted a solution to a problem, that they wanted to become aware of it because it's not a common thing, intellectual property rights. They wanted to have access to meeting them where they are, which means some cases they wanted to solve the problem themselves. Some cases they wanted a little bit of help, but they didn't want to spend a lot of money like on an attorney. And in some cases they said, if I can afford it, I'll pay someone to do this for me. Another aspect that the members said they wanted is they wanted it to be affordable. So I'll share with you a little bit later how we structured our work, which is a social enterprise type, to be what's called low bono, which means that it's a certain affordable price cap or less. And we also have some no-cost options. And last but not least, they said, what you're offering is interesting, but how do we know it's even of value to us? So in listening to our members, we structured what we do in a way to help them achieve return on investment in their terms, whether that's recognition, ownership, or money. So the member piece is key, and their energy gives us propulsion power. And it's useful to us because most of what we do is referral. So by giving them value for what we offer as a social impact service, they acknowledge that by sending more people to us. So individually, we are one drop. Together, we are an ocean. Probably speaks to what many of you are doing in offering your not-for-profit services and solutions to your audience that you serve. The third of the 4 M's is model. And this is the business model. And this goes back to that, what that Georgetown subject matter expert said. And to give you a great use case on model, it talks about hidden costs and benefits. We have a number of clients, about 25% are in the social impact space themselves. One of them has a unique idea that's a hybrid. They're setting up a 501c6 to do investments and to raise capital, to invest in the mission for the social problem they want to solve. And they're partnering that 501c6 with a 501c3 to assist with direct service delivery and to also offer grants and other types of funding. So as you can imagine, on one hand, they have a not-for-profit investment vehicle. It's a business association that's supporting members' issues. And on the other hand, they have an investment vehicle that is investing capital. And with some of the returns and proceeds, will be able to invest in that other organization to support their mission. A creative approach that other organizations can follow if that's in their best interest. And additionally, this client is also establishing partnerships with large brand organizations that benefit from their work, that can either offer products and services to support their not-for-profit investment, or that can in fact help with supporting their audience and that have a vested interest in that audience. So the business model is a key opportunity that can arise from thinking about where are you today, where do you want to be, and then how to negotiate the different challenges and opportunities being encountered. And then the last of the 4 M's is a use case for a client that embodies all of the things we mentioned. From a mission perspective, you see Najwa. Najwa is a native of Washington, D.C., living in Southeast D.C., which is historically, economically disadvantaged part of the city. And Najwa's superpower is composting. She and her parents have been ardent supporters of nature, and she is a subject matter expert on composting. So much so that governments and other entities want her to come and to educate their students and their organizations about composting. As a part of Najwa's evangelism, she came up with a song, which is very energizing for kids and for others. And her concern was, well, how do I, protect the song and the brand so that when I share it, people can't use it without either giving me some compensation for my organization or credit, depending on the organization. So Najwa is using intellectual property protection to protect her song. She has it in the marketplace. She's been received awards and acknowledgement, and that's allowed her to position to do that last of the 4 M's. I'm calling it money, but my experience and best practices, that last M is not always about cash in hand. In our social impact startup, we've actually received services in kind that have allowed us to build our technology instead of money. So we've done a joint venture with other developers that allows them to benefit from our success, allows us to avoid spending money, and it's allowed us to achieve milestones in the form of resources. The so what on that is, as you consider pivoting and adapting your business model, obviously you want to raise money where it makes sense, but keep our minds open to services and other things that can allow us to avoid cost or capture opportunities that may not be that cash in hand. So those are the 4 M's that we've experienced and we've identified, and that we've executed as a social enterprise with some success. The law practice started in 2016. It grew from 0 to over 150 client relationships, and we have a small team today. And the legal tech venture that I mentioned started last year. And in fact, I'm going to pivot and telling you a little bit more about that as a personal example of pursuing a not-for-profit or social mission with a different structure. So let me pause for a moment and let us catch our breath. Has what I shared to this point been helpful? Any questions or comments that might address before we go into a specific share about how we've approached this opportunity of the changes that are going on today?
Yeah, feel free to come off mute. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts, we can have a little question break. If not, I know I have a few.
You mentioned the young lady protecting her song that she created for the compost. And thank you, Chris, for being a guest speaker today. First, I should have started with that. And you mentioned the young lady who was protecting the song she created for her composting business. And did she protect it through copyright, or did she have to trademark it? Like normally I know like with written materials, it's a copyright protection. How did she protect her song?
Excellent question. And also it provides a great segue into the next part. Short answer is she's using copyright, and there are 2 forms of copyright. And you're asking a great question, because the first form she's using is something called common law. You may say, well, what the heck is that? If you have original creative expression, and original means that you do it, it's your novelty. If you put it in a format that is tangible, like piece of paper, digital file, something that can be touched, seen, the way it works in the United States, and it actually also works this way in 192 other countries around the world, you get what's called a common law copyright. So it's like, drop the mic. Once you met the standard, it exists. Didn't spend a penny. But if you want to protect it, you need to be able to document that you've done that in case someone starts to use it and you want to challenge them. Now, there are a couple of things that are limiting factors on that common law copyright. The first is it only covers your local area. So in Najwa's case, she's a citizen of the District of Columbia. She only has that copyright protection in the District of Columbia. If someone outside were to do that, her creative expression is at risk. The second limitation is there are limits on the amount of legal protection that Najwa has in that common law copyright. But she chose that path because that was most affordable to her at the time she created the song. That's part A. And we also developed some technology to help Najwa do that very fast, very affordable, like for $1. But then that gets to part B, which she's also doing. She said, I'm getting interest from outside the district as well. How do I want to protect my song to cover the nation and also globally? So she's registering her song with copyright.gov, which is the federal copyright office. It's part of the Library of Congress. And once that's granted, that will protect her across the United States. So she's using those two approaches to protect her song. And the additional benefit of that copyright.gov version, that federal version, is it comes with enhanced legal protections granted by Supreme Court decisions. And it also gives her access to some treaties that can carry over her protection outside the United States.
I had the privilege of visiting the Copyright Office a few weeks ago when I was in DC, and it's incredible. We did a tour, and what I guess I knew, but they brought to the forefront of my mind is your copyright is valid for the life of the one who registers it, plus 70 years after they pass. So that's a good thing. But I guess the other 192 countries would be something to consider. But I don't want to take too much time. Thank you for the response to that.
Well, thank you for the question. And just for full disclosure, the Federal Copyright Registry, typically it's $55 or more, depending on which options you use. So you're looking at a $55 investment or more. The common law version, you just need to meet the standard. You want to document and evidence it. Also on the federal version, there is an examination process. So you do file an application. Copyright Office assigns an examiner to look at it and make sure it meets the legal standards. And if it's approved, it typically takes anywhere from 60 days to worst case scenario, it may be around half a year. It depends on how complex. But once it's approved, you get those privileges that go with owning that. And copyrights are considered to be intellectual property rights. They're intangible assets. And if you've seen movies or you've listened to music, you have a sense for how much monetary value can be tied up in those, as well as literature and other forms. So, outstanding question, and I can nerd out on it, but I know we're on the clock. So I'm going to push forward in the agenda and then field any other questions afterward. Thank you. And that gets us to talking a little bit about our story, my story, a little bit of a firsthand witness, if you will. And my story starts in part with that gentleman second on the left in the image you see. That's my Uncle Wiley Bennett. He was a singer with a group in the 60s. And the family lore has it that he wrote a song that in doing forensics, we found should have been worth $1 million to him. The challenges were that my uncle was one of 13 kids born to a couple of farmers from Chesterfield, South Carolina, and he did not understand copyrights. So the result was no royalties for my uncle and no generational wealth for him to pass on. And hearing that story, I was a bit incensed. So I looked at our social impact law practice and said, this is not good. And the more research I did, I found it was a pretty common story. There are stories about the song "The Lion Sleeps Tonight," where the song was misappropriated from someone in South Africa, and a lot of money was made, and they didn't receive any wealth for quite a bit of time, and it was nominal when it was returned. And I've talked to people in South Dakota, Minnesota, Virginia, North Carolina, and other places that have offered similar stories. So we did some research and we found that if we could solve my uncle's problem, we could also address 4 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, dealing with economic opportunity, innovation, inequalities, and partnerships. So we did that. We invested a number of years incubating an idea in our social impact law practice, technology, innovation, law, and it speaks to how our work is at the intersection of those 3 disciplines. And we look for ways to help anyone that wants to use it, but we reach out aggressively to the historically underserved. And we redefine that writ large. Doesn't matter about where you live, your educational level, economics, etc. You may say, give me a little more detail on that, Chris. We took a snapshot of our audience that the law practice served, and it's available, the work is available to all, but 95% were people of color, 60% were women, 50% were small businesses or startups, 25% were in the social impact space, as I mentioned previously, and 25% were creatives like artists and others. Their age range was from 7, so we actually helped a group of 7-year-olds create a copyright, to 67. And that's observed. So I don't know if that particular client is actually 67, but that's our estimate. Their income or economic level was from public housing to roughly middle class. And geographically, 60% are in the US, 30% are in Asia, and 10% are in Africa. So let me just pause and make that suggestion to you that if you haven't already, to the extent that your model allows, if it's centric to a specific country like the United States, step back and ask yourself, can I look elsewhere for community and potential resources and collaborations that can help me achieve my mission? Because we're finding that because of global interconnectivity, there may be significant opportunities, and we've experienced that personally with the growth we've seen in Asia. So that got us started on this whole mission at scale. We went from focusing on Southeast DC to looking at the world with a social impact mission. And in that process, to complement the question that our participant had a few minutes ago, there are 4 different forms of traditional intellectual property: copyrights, trade secrets, trademarks, and patents. And then there are some emerging forms like data rights. So that's why when you hear someone say, if you're using a service and it's free, you're the product, because your data is the product. Data rights are emerging. There are things emerging in virtual reality and Web3, but those 4 traditional forms. Our research showed us that the best starting form of intellectual property to really democratize, to make available to folks, was copyrights, because it has those 16 different forms of creative expression that it can protect. And remember, we discussed it. If it's original, you do it. It's creative expression, one of these 16 formats, and you put it in a tangible media, it comes into existence as a matter of law in the United States and other countries. That is a powerful, accessible way that people can have a product of the mind to create something that meets them where they are, doesn't care about their education level. What it really cares about is your unique life experience that has allowed you to come up with that soulful song, or that amazing piece of art, or that software code that is allowing that app, or any of those other forms of intellectual property, and specifically copyrights. So we hyper-focused on copyrights, not for the law practice, but for the technology startup, because we said, we have a global audience. So, we can't open offices everywhere. We're like 4 attorneys and a bunch of volunteers and other folks. So we actually raised capital with that idea of making copyrights democratic and turning it into a software service that could be packaged with working with affordable attorneys and offered around the world. And that resulted in us creating T-I-L group. unlike the law practice, which is a limited liability corporation, TIL Group is a benefit corporation. What that means is it has dual fiduciary responsibilities. We have responsibilities to our funders to deliver a reasonable return on their money, but we have an co-equal responsibility to democratize intellectual property rights. And if we don't deliver on either of those, we can get in trouble with our funders. So we're able to raise a small seed round amount, and we used our learning from the law practice to actually build a software product that makes it easier and less costly to create copyrights. What that led to was this. That's another image of my Uncle Wally. If my Uncle Wally were here today and he were using our product, which is called IP Rights for All, he would be aware of copyrights. He would have access to being able to use it, whether he wanted to do a common law right like Najwa did, or whether he wanted to actually use it to perhaps register it federally. And if he does that successfully, as our participant mentioned, he would get protection for that song for his lifetime, plus 70 years. In some cases, you can actually get it up to 90. And it would allow him to control who can copy, who can use that song. And the way we would allow my uncle to have that protection would be through those two logos that you see on the right is Tilly. Tilly is an artificial intelligence chatbot that we built with a very small amount of funding that we raised from 1863 Ventures. So Tilly would have made my uncle aware of copyrights, and Tilly is available at no cost. She's an IP consultant that doesn't sleep. Once my uncle had determined that he had a copyright and he wanted to pursue it, he could use C3. And C3 is blockchain, and that's a mathematical method of overlaying digital assets and overlaying evidence of digital assets so that you make it really hard for anyone to copy it or to use it without your authorization. Those are the two things that we brought together in our legal tech startup to disrupt what we perceive are structural barriers that keep everyone in the world from being able to access using their creativity and to pursue economic opportunity. And the key thing I'll emphasize on TIL Group and IP Rights for All is being a benefit corporation, which means that we want it to be sustainable, and we believe that the competitive markets are the best information source for us to be able to adapt to what's changing in the world so that we're offering value. But we also wanted to have a social impact mission and be able to focus on that without the distraction of having investors say, only ask questions about, have you given me my earnings per share today? So that was our journey in coming up with TIL Group and a social enterprise model to achieve a social impact purpose. So I think we're coming to the close right now. I want to open the door for anyone in the audience to ask questions or comments. And I'm going to energize Jacob in addition to you, because there's one really big freaking number that I came across a couple of days ago from the one of the deputy secretaries of the World Intellectual Property Organization. And that number didn't blow my mind, but it just broadened my perspective of how potentially important what we're doing and how much of an opportunity not-for-profits have if they become aware of it and start to look at their business models this way. So let's all jump in, chat, come off mute, whatever, because I'm going to see, and hey, be honest, let me know if this actually is striking to you or something you didn't know, with a couple of slides that I think for me personally were like, well, slide one, and this is from Lisa Jorgensen, who is a deputy director at the World Intellectual Property Organization. I'll let you read it. I'm going to highlight just a couple of things in bold from it. And for context, the last time I looked earlier this year, the total value of global gross domestic product in US dollar terms was about $125 trillion. That's a lot of money, 125 trillion. The United States was about 20% of that. The US was about 25 trillion or so for gross domestic product, like economic output. As you can see, Ms. Jorgensen says 80 trillion of that is in digital intangible assets. And intangible assets are primarily intellectual property, by the way, just to put that in context. 80 trillion of $125 trillion global domestic product. That was mind-boggling to me. And it's increasing, it's accelerating. So if you step back and think about it, previously a lot of value in the world was in plants, it was in land, it was in farms, it was in cars, hard products. Over time, more transition to services, accounting, consulting, software development. And now we're at a point where it's transitioning into digital wallet currencies, blockchain, electronic funds transfers, data. So that 90% of the S&P value being in intangible assets today was another one. Wow. So intangible assets, brands, trademarks, copyrights, patents, trade secrets, data. Is that surprising to anyone other than Chris Bennett?
It's definitely surprising to me. And my only comment before passing it back to the audience is just, it starts with knowledge. I feel like a lot of nonprofits, leaders, whether it's you're too caught up in the daily grind and mix and primarily a lot of fundraising, but it starts with knowledge. It starts with understanding that this is the game that, all of these other big corporations and companies and organizations are playing, that nonprofits and other impact focused organizations and leaders can, if it makes sense, also benefit. And what makes me more excited is thinking of the idea of shared value. And you can still be competitive and profitable and do right by community, people, and planet all at the same time. And what I love about B Corps, and it starts with knowledge. It starts with seeing this number, going back and looking like how can I, not only protect my intellectual property but gain value from it. Chris, this has been an amazing presentation. So I want to pass it to the audience. Feel free to come off mute. Are there any questions or comments? I know, Siobhan, you have some experience with as a nonprofit founder with intellectual property, but would love to open it up to all for any questions.
Thank you for that, Jacob and Siobhan. I want to, if I may, just prod you and others with that second of what I thought was not quite an epiphany, but it was pretty interesting. Assistant Director Jordanson went on to say, cross-border payments for the use of IP, intellectual property, is now worth $1 trillion annually. So $1 trillion of different economic value going back and forth every year for copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, data, those kind of things. And I'll say this, then I'm going to actually stop because I can nerd out on this, but I learn more from listening to you. This volume is happening with probably only 40% of the world's global population in business and persons participating. 60% of the world's population, based on research we did about 6 years ago, and we did a presentation to the Georgetown University Alumni Association, folks haven't had a chance to play. Think of how much benefit we could all get if we make everyone aware of this, and if they choose to, give them the opportunity to participate through whether it's creative expression or whether it's whatever mechanism they want. Think of how many new ideas, how much additional value, and how much shared benefit might be realized from that.
Well, I missed quite a lot of your presentation, but I caught the last 20 minutes. And because we use IP a lot, and we have exclusive rights to agricultural technology, I understand everything you're talking about, because nonprofits are all doing the same thing. We're all trying to help our communities. And specifically, if I just address food, food growing, agriculture, which is where that's our arena. I think having groundbreaking technologies or any kind of IP, that the ones that you were talking about, you can list them, it will set your organization apart. Because even though we're all very collaborative in this arena, the nonprofit world, you do have competition, right? If you have competition for grants. So if you're all trying to get a grant to put raised beds in a community garden, you know that you have 20 other grants coming in that are along the same lines. They're just purchasing off the shelf equipment and materials and that sort of thing. And what happens is you just all blend in together. So the grant makers, they just decide, probably based on other criteria other than your good idea, because your good idea is part of, I'm not sure what they call it, Chris. Like it's like everybody has the same idea, and it's already out there. We already, we make our rows the same way, and we dig our holes the same way, and things like that. If you can find something, if you can find technology somebody else has developed and they license to you as an exclusive, because retail is dead, in a lot of cases, especially, because of the economy. When we see the economy rebound, you'll see retail rebound. But what happens is for us, we look at a nonprofit, the rules allow us to provide goods and services if it relates to our mission. So goods and services, for us, we use Crop Circle Farms. I happen to have a spiral t-shirt on today. And we grow in spirals, and we use Crop Circle irrigation technology. We have a fertilizer that's specialized, and it's all patented, and the processes are patented and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got your trade secrets, but we are willing, what we've done is we've done a licensing deal with the inventor. And so we are the only people in the world that can use his technology that he's designed specifically for community farms and garden projects. But it's not the only thing we bring to the table when we do that. So it's not like they can go and get it off the shelf at the big box store and use it. It's something that is very unique to us, and what comes with it is the trade secrets, the teaching, the knowledge sharing. And it's the knowledge sharing that's so important, because if we are going to make a big impact, we have to be able to share our knowledge, right? And it expands from there. But have you ever bought a product where they say, hey, I'm going to hang out with you for as long as you're using this product. If you ever need me to give you some tips, I've got a whole virtual school of how to use these products and grow with them, and, all the stages of growing. You don't get that in retail. In the nonprofit world, because we do projects, you can do that. So utilizing IP ensures that you're going to help your community in a bigger way than you would if they were just buying something off the shelf. So if you could come in as a consultant, you know, how to grow tomatoes or something, but it's really not going to, in the long run, it's not going to help them. So if you can combine it, your IP, your access to IP, your exclusivity to IP with sharing knowledge and so on and so forth. For instance, we have, you know, we grow in spirals, but that's patented. That method is patented, right? So the other thing is we made sure our board had some IP, intellectual property attorneys on it, and we have two. We have 3 corporate lawyers and 2 of them have IP. So, and we did that because we wanted to make sure that we were proactively protected, because we are doing work for the communities, and these are long-term projects. When we make a partnership, a collaboration with another nonprofit, say, you know, in Ohio or in Las Vegas, we're there for a long, long time with them, because we provide all kinds of other things, you know, things that just come with the cost of the project. There's grant funding or sponsorships or anything like that. So it's not about defending the innovation, it's about securing the right for them to use it for social good and
Wow.
the support that they need ongoing.
I'm going to drop the mic on that, if I may, on your behalf, and hand it back to Jake. We're a little bit over, but
Okay.
that's the message in a nutshell. That's a real world use case. So thank you for sharing that.
And yeah, I was just going to say sort of the same thing, and to sort of close this up and open for, you know, future conversations. Like, this is something I want to continue to build upon, and, you know, having conversations where we can go deeper into this, not only go deeper, but take actionable steps. You know, first step is looking at your organization. What could be some options to explore? And then, you know, using resources and people to, not how. But I think, you know, what I would like to do over the next several months is keep building on these conversations and provide a space for nonprofits, impact organizations, to learn and gain knowledge. That's where it starts. And then going back and have, after that aha moment, being able to harness this and use it for, you know, like what Siobhan was talking about is, you know, this can really enhance local economies and communities. And so that's really where we should be focusing a lot of our energy right now, is starting at that foundational piece of communities. And so, Chris, thank you so much. You can see the you know, there's all the names of the people. Thank you, Jim, for putting this together, and you know, everything you do at Global Chamber. Chris, this was such valuable information, and I cannot wait to continue to build on this conversation. We'll reach out after to see how we can do that. But yeah, so glad that everybody came. And yeah, we'll see y'all soon. Check in on the WhatsApp group for Global Chamber Nonprofits, and we'll continue the conversation in there to our next virtual meeting. All right.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Chris. This was great.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone.
Goodbye.